Chapter 5. Farmers in the Midwest need good land for their work to prosper. So do gypsy flyers. They have to be close to their customers. They must find fields a block from town, fields planted in grass, or hay or oats or wheat, cut grass short. No cows nearby to eat the fabric from their plains. Alongside a road for cars, a gate in the fence for people, fields lined so that the airplane doesn't have to fly low over any house anywhere. Smooth enough their machines aren't jolted to pieces, rolling 50 miles per hour over the ground. Long enough to get in and out safely in the hot, calm days of summer, and permission from the owner to fly there for a day. I thought of this as we flew north through Saturday morning, the Messiah and me, the green and gold of the land pulling softly by, 1,000 feet below. Donald Shimoda's Traveler floated noisily off my right wing, bouncing sunlight all directions from its mirror paints. A lovely airplane, I thought, but too big for real hard-time brainstorming. It does carry 2 passengers at a time, but it also weighs twice as much as a fleet, and also needs much more field to get off the ground and back on. I owned a Traveler once, but traded it finally for the fleet, which can get into tiny fields the size you're a lot more likely to find close to town. I could work a 500-foot field with the fleet, where the Traveler took 1,000 or 1,300. You tie yourself to this guy, I thought, and you tie yourself to the limits of his airplane. And sure enough, the moment I thought that, I spotted a neat little cow pasture by the town going past below. It was a standard 13-20-foot farm, field cut in half. The other half sold to the town for a baseball diamond. Knowing Shimoda's plane couldn't land there, I kicked my little flying machine up on her left wing, nose up, power to idle, and sank like a safe toward the ballpark. We touched in the grass just beyond the left field fence and rolled to a stop with room to spare. I just wanted to show off a little, show 'em what the fleet can do, properly flown. A burst of throttle swung me around for takeoff again, but when I turned up to go, there was the Traveler all set up on final approach to land. Trail down, right wing up, it looked like some glorious, graceful condor turning to land on a broom straw. He was low and slow, so that the hair on my neck prickled. I was about to see a crash. A Traveler. You want to hold at least 60 miles per hour over the fence to land. Slower than that with an airplane that stalls at 50, and you're going to wrap it up in a ball. But what I saw was this gold and snow biplane stop in the air instead. Well, I don't mean stop, but it was flying no more than 30 miles per hour. An airplane that stalls at 50, mind you, stop in the air at sort of sigh, 3-point on the grass. He used half, maybe 3/4 of the space I had used to land the fleet. I just sat in the cockpit and looked, while he taxied alongside and shut down. When I turned off my engine, still staring at him dumbly, he called, "Nice field you found. Close enough to town, hey?" Our first customers, 2 boys on a Honda motorcycle, were already turning in to see what was going on. "What do you mean close to town?" I shouted over the engine, noise still in my ears. "Well, it's half a block away." "No, not that. What was that landing? In the Traveler. How did you land here?" He winked at me. "Magic." "No, Don, really, I saw the way you landed." He could see that I was shocked and more than a bit frightened. "Richard, do you want to know what the answer to floating wrenches in the air and healing all sickness and turning water into wine and walking on the waves and landing Travelers on 100 feet of grass? Do you want to know the answer to all these miracles?" I felt as though he had turned a laser on me. "I want to know how you landed here." "Listen," he called across the gulf between us. "This world and everything in it? Illusions, Richard. Every bit of it. Illusions. Do you understand that?" There was no wink, no smile, as though he was suddenly furious with me for not knowing long ago. The motorcycle stopped by the tail of his airplane. The boys looked eager to fly. "Yeah," was all I could think to say. Roger on the illusions. Then they were on him for a ride, and it was up to me to find the owner of the field before he found us, and ask permission to fly out of his cow pasture. The only way to describe the takeoffs and landings the Traveler made that day is to tell you that it looked like a fake Traveler. As if the plane were really an E-2 Cub, or a helicopter dressed in a Traveler costume. Somehow, it was a lot easier for me to accept a 9/16 end wrench floating weightless than to be calm watching that airplane of his lift off the ground with passengers aboard it at 30 miles per hour. It's one thing to believe in levitation when you see it. It's another thing entirely to believe in miracles. I kept thinking about what he had said so fiercely. Illusions. Someone had said that before when I was a kid, learning magic. Magicians say that. They carefully tell us, look, this is not a miracle you are about to see. This is not really magic. What it is an effect. It is the illusion of magic. Then they pull a chandelier from a walnut and change an elephant into a tennis racket. In a burst of insight, I pulled the Messiah's handbook from my pocket and opened it. 2 sentences stood alone on the page. There is no such thing as a problem without a gift for you in its hands. You seek problems because you need their gifts. I didn't quite know why, but reading that eased my confusions. I read it over until I knew it with my eyes closed. The name of the town was Troy, and the pastor there promised to be as good to us as the hayfield in Ferris had been. But in Ferris I had felt a certain calm, and here was a tension in the air that I didn't like at all. The flying that was once in a lifetime adventure to our passengers was for me routine, overshadowed by that strange uneasiness. My adventure was this character I was flying with, the impossible way he made his airplane go, and the odd things that he had said to try to explain it. The people of Troy were no more stunned by the miracle of the traveler's flight than I would have been had some town bell rung at noon that hadn't rung for 60 years. They didn't know that it was impossible for what was happening to happen. Thanks for the ride, they said. And is this all you do for a living? Don't you work somewhere? And why'd you pick a little place like Troy? And Jerry, your farm's no bigger than a shoebox. We had a busy afternoon. There were lots of people coming out to fly, and we were going to make a lot of money. Still, part of me began to say, get out, get away from this place. I have ignored that before and always been sorry for it. About 3 o'clock, I had shut down my engine for gas, walked twice back and forth from the Skelly station with 2 5-gallon cans of car gas, when it struck me that not once had I seen the traveler refuel. Shimoda hadn't put gas in his plane since sometime before Ferris, and I had watched him fly that machine for 7 hours now, going on 8, without another drop of gas or oil. And though I knew that he was a good man and wouldn't hurt me, I was frightened again. If you really stretch it, throttle back to minimum revolutions and mix your dead lean in cruise, you can make a traveler run 5 hours at the outside, but not 8 hours of takeoffs and landings. He flew steadily on ride after ride, while I poured the regular into my center section tank and added a quart of oil to the engine. There was a line of people waiting to fly. It was as if he didn't want to disappoint them. I caught him, though. As he helped a man and his wife into the front cockpit of his plane, I tried to sound just as calm and casual as I could. Don, how you doing on fuel? Need any gas? I stared at his wingtip with an empty 5-gallon can in my hand. He looked straight into my eyes and he frowned, puzzled, as though I had asked if he needed any air to breathe. No, he said, and I felt like a slow first grader at the back of the classroom. No, Richard, I don't need any gas. It annoyed me. I know a little bit about airplane engines and fuel. Well then, I flared at him, how about some uranium? He laughed and melted me at once. No thanks, I filled it last year. And then he was in the cockpit and gone with his passengers in that supernatural slow-motion takeoff. I wished first that the people would go home, then that we would get out of here fast, people or not, then that I would have had the sense to get out of there alone, at once. All I wanted was to take off and find a big empty field far away from any town and just sit and think and write what was happening in my journal, make some sense out of it. I stayed out of the fleet, resting till Shimoda landed again. I walked to his cockpit, there in the propeller blast of the big engine. I've flown about enough, Don. Gonna be on my way. Land out from towns and be a little less busy for a while. It's been fun flying with you. See you again sometime, okay? He didn't blink. One more flight and I'll be with you. Guy's been waiting. All right. The guy was waiting in a battered wheelchair, rolled down the block to the field. He was kind of smashed down and twisted into the seat as if some high-gravity force, but he was here because he wanted to go flying. There were other people around, 40 or 50, some in, some out of their cars, watching curiously how Don would get the man from the chair into the plane. He didn't think about it at all. Do you want to fly? The man in the wheelchair smiled a twisted smile and nodded sideways. Let's go, let's do it, Don said quietly, as though he was talking to someone who had waited on the sidelines a long while, whose time had come to go into the game again. If there was anything strange about that moment looking back on it, it was the intensity with which he spoke. It was casual, yes, but it was a command, too. That expected the man to get up and get into the plane, no excuses. What happened then, it was as if the man had been acting, and finished the last scene of his crippled, invalid part. It looked staged. The high gravity broke away from him as though it was never there. He launched off the chair at a half-run, amazed at himself towards the traveler. I was standing close and heard him. "What did you do?" he said. "What did you do to me?" "Are you going to fly or not going to fly?" Don said. "The price is $3. Pay me before takeoff, please." "I'm flying," he said. Shimoda didn't help him into the front cockpit the way he usually helped his passengers. The people in the cars were out of the cars. There was an odd murmur from the watchers, and then shocked silence. The man hadn't walked since his truck went off a bridge 11 years before. Like a kid putting on bedsheet wings, he hopped into the cockpit and slid down into the seat, moving his arms a lot as though he had just been given arms to play with. Before anybody could talk, Don pressed the throttle and the Traveler rolled up into the air, steep turning around the trees and climbing like fury. Can a moment be happy and at the same time terrifying? There followed a lot of moments like that. It was wonder at what could only be called a miraculous healing to a man who looked like he deserved it, and at the same time, something uncomfortable was going to happen when those two came down again. The crowd of people is a mob that is not good at all. Minutes ticked, eyes bored into that little biplane flying so carefree under the sun, and some violent thing was about to set off. The Traveler flew some steep lazy eights, a tight spiral, and then it was floating over the fence like a slow, noisy flying saucer to land. If he had any sense at all, he would let his passenger off at the far side of the field, take off fast and disappear. There were more people coming, another wheelchair pushed by a lady running. He taxied toward the crowd, spun the plane about to keep the propeller pointing away, shut down the engine. The people ran to the cockpit, and for a minute I thought they were going to tear fabric from the fuselage to get at the two. Was it cowardly? I don't know. I walked to my airplane, pumped the throttle and primer, pulled the propeller to start the engine. Then I got into the cockpit and turned the fleet into the wind and took off. The last I saw of Donald Shimoda, he was sitting on the rim of his cockpit, and the mob had surrounded. I turned east, then southeast, and after a while, the big first field I found with trees for shade and a stream to drink from, I landed for the night. It was a long way from any town.